Thanks. I see it's a pretty big crowd, so thanks everyone for joining. I'll just give a quick intro, and then hopefully I'll do the least amount of talking up here, and we can get you guys some info from the experts who are actually in the weeds every day. I'm Chris. I'm a co-founder of Idiomatic. I've been a part of Support Driven for years and years now. I met Scott when he still lived down here in the Bay Area. So it's just been a really good community to be a part of. So we're really excited to join with Support Driven and put on this webinar, and we'll be doing a few other things. I mentioned earlier that I ran here from the gym in the shower, so if I'm sweating, I apologize. We have with us three folks that we've worked with or I should say Idiomatic is a customer intelligence platform. We help companies understand their customer feedback. So the topic today is about how to make customer feedback actionable, not really focused on Idiomatic at all, but just for context. And so we have three folks that we've worked with or work with at Idiomatic on the panel here: Ben, Allison, and Serena. So thanks so much, Ben, Allison, and Serena, for joining. Maybe as a start, just as an intro, I'll start with you, Allison, to maybe introduce yourself, just the company you work at, brief description of your role, and then given the news and how much of a bummer that is, I thought one thing that makes you excited as we sit here today, or could be something personal, professional, anything that you're excited about. Give a little levity into the room. So maybe we'll start with you, Allison.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Allison Tinius. I'm a program manager on our CXM, customer experience management team at HubSpot. Background in like nonprofit work, and then moved into tech in 2014 at Eventbrite, and then moved over to HubSpot in 2020. And I think that covered everything you asked, except the fun thing, the thing I'm excited about. It's probably live music starting to come back. In August, am finally going to a show I bought tickets for in 2019. Going to see Rage Against the Machine with my husband in August. And then my kids are getting to go to their first concert ever. We're going to see Weird Al at the Ryman this weekend. So Lots of fun stuff with live music coming up for sure.
Great answer. I missed that. I mean, you worked at Eventbrite, so you know.
And I live in Nashville, so lots of music all around.
That's awesome. How about you, Serena, next, maybe with the intro and something you're excited about?
So first of all, I'm super excited about you going to Al Yankovic, Allison. That sounds amazing. I would love to do that just for the goodness of the cheese there. Hi, I'm Serena Glossinger. I am a manager of customer support operations at Upwork. I have been in customer experience in one form or another for the last 14 years of my career. When I am not doing all of the fun things with CX, I'm a beekeeper. So I'm excited that my bees live here. So I'm very excited that my bees are a terrible winter this year. We had, I live in Chelan, Washington, which is about 3 hours outside of Seattle. We typically get snow here and there throughout the winter, but this year we got snow one time, and it was all of the snow for all of the seasons. And so I was really nervous about that, but they lived. So I'm super excited. So yeah, it's nice to meet y'all.
Thanks, Serena. And last but not least, Ben.
Hey, I'm Ben McCaskill. I'm currently president and COO at SmugMug, which also owns Flickr. It's a company I joined 19 years ago now, just doing frontline customer support. So I've been in customer support for 19 years and have helped build the teams at both of those platforms over those years. So something I'm still involved in and still very passionate about. In terms of something I'm excited about, we're working on, I'm going to kind of bleed work and personal here because I get to cross my passions in a bit. We're working on a project, rolling a foundation right now at work for digital longevity, where we're thinking about what are the photos that are uploaded to Flickr going to look like and be accessed in 100 years from now, instead of kind of the disposable internet ecosystem that we're used to the last few decades. So getting to work with people like the Library of Congress and the Internet Archive and putting together a 100-year plan, it's really kind of cool to think about doing something that'll be here long after I am. So yeah, it's fun.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I probably need to clean up my photos if they're going to last after I die. Thanks, guys. So I thought as a useful background to start talking about how you guys internally are taking customer feedback and acting on it. To first talk about what types of customer feedback or where you're collecting it and sort of how, right? All of the companies that Idiomatic works with have different setups, have slightly different setups and different systems and different tools that they use. Some care about certain channels versus others. So I thought that'd be a useful just sort of background so that when we're talking about this for this audience, all of the people in Support Driven probably have different setups, but they can kind of zero in on the setups that are most close to them. So maybe we'll go reverse order. We can continue with you, Ben. Just can you tell us a little bit about sort of what channels are you guys monitoring and sort of what tools are you using in your toolbox?
Yeah, absolutely. I think most of you are probably familiar with Flickr, but for those who aren't familiar with our brands, we're consumer brands, which of course influences which channels we're looking at, right? We don't have success teams directly connected to big accounts. We have account managers in that regard. We're talking about literally millions of customers a year. And so, we're looking at big sorts of channels, and that includes, the obvious ones of help desk and live chat, tickets and chat transcripts. But that also becomes really critically important for us to be monitoring our app store reviews for both of our, we have 2 major apps in both major app stores. So those are critically important for us to be watching and responding to. We're also we're piping in feature requests as kind of, we've tried everything over the 20 years to try and keep track of feature requests. And the best one for us right now is sending that text surveys and that text into Idiomatic. We also do cancellation surveys. Why are you stopping your subscription? Hopefully you're not, but why are you stopping your subscription? And we've also do things like trial lapsed data. Why didn't you convert after you got a free trial? So we have quite a few different data sources from both of our platforms coming into Idiomatic.
Yeah, that's awesome. I imagine for a lot of us here, as the world has been changing recently, the cancellation surveys and the focus on churn is going to be critically important going forward, because I think consumer spending and business spending is definitely going to change, and people are going to be looking to cut costs across the board for sure. Yeah. How about you, Serena? Maybe you could talk a little bit about the channels that you guys view as important, and what you guys are monitoring.
Yeah, absolutely. So our bread and butter really comes from Zendesk support data, as well as a post-project NPS survey that we've done. We're just revamping our survey project in general for Upwork, which has been fantastic. So we're looking at different ways we want to survey customers. And to start with that, the post-project NPS has been really, really helpful. And getting all of that information into Idiomatic to read through it has been very helpful as well. And then in addition to that, we have all kinds of little things where we're listening to everybody. So like Salesforce, Forethought/Chatbot. We also have a really fantastic community where our customers can directly communicate with peers within the platform, as well as with us. So
awesome. Great. And then last, Allison at HubSpot.
Yeah, so at HubSpot, we have a lot of different tools that we're using or ways we're connecting with customers. We probably group them in about 4 different areas. So there's sentiment, like product NPS. We have an annual relationship survey. There's various CSAT surveys as well. We have what we would call ideas. So feature requests, understand that, how that's a tough area for sure. We call them roadmap requests, and we are using Idiomatic to help analyze those as well. We have an internal survey with our frontline reps as well that we're taking. And then we do like town halls as well. We have the community and ideas forum. We also have kind of what we would deem ways we amplify the voice of the customer within the company. So a customer advisory board, as well as customer interviews that we're conducting. And then we are fortunate enough to have some great product analysts on our team. So we're also monitoring, close loss cancellation data and customer value metrics as well.
Awesome. You guys maybe are a biased sample since you all work with Idiomatic, right? So you probably are sort of over-indexed on caring about customer feedback, right? As opposed to sort of like the average company. But I think probably support-driven, the community in general is also probably a pretty biased sample in terms of like being focused on customers. So that may inform your answer to this next question, which is basically, what have been traditionally the biggest roadblocks to your company actually taking action on the customer feedback? Because a lot of the companies we talk to, their heart is in the right place. They want to do something. They want to monitor. They care about the customer. They want a better customer experience. But when it comes down to it, and their team starts sharing that data or whatever they're doing, they just don't see any action, being taken as a result of that. So maybe Serena, if we could start with you, in your experience, in this field. I know you're more recent at Upwork, but you've been working in this space for a long time. What have in your experience been the sort of biggest roadblocks to your company actually taking action on what customers are saying?
I would say the quality of our survey data has been a little bit tricky. So originally, when we were looking at our surveys, we weren't getting a lot of responses. And our survey that we use is basically a pop-up survey, but we weren't asking the right questions on that survey. So what ended up happening is we had an idea that we wanted to collect feedback. We thought we were asking the right questions. And it turns out that we really needed to lean into a little bit more of those open-ended questions to understand exactly what we could do to help our customers with X, Y, and Z. So that has really been a big piece. And then also, we've been really working to stitch together our voice of the customer to financial outcomes and behavioral, like operational drivers. And so we're trying to focus on retooling ourselves by making, better business cases and things like that around what we're doing with our program to advocate better. So yeah.
No, that's great. Maybe one follow-up question is, before you leaned into the open-ended, were you taking those insights and going, and was the response, hey, this is such a small response rate that we don't trust the data? Is that kind of the—
Oh yeah. The response rate was interesting. So though we were getting responses, our original survey had two questions. It was the NPS question, and then an open-ended, like, tell us why you gave us that score. And so, we have a great NPS. People would, click the button and do all of that, but then we just weren't getting any verbatims. We weren't getting any customer feedback. So what we've been doing is really looking at the place in which that survey is located and where that customer's mind is at during that piece of that part of their experience on our platform, and what kind of questions might spark or trigger feedback through that whole experience. So if they're ending a contract, meaning they've completed a body of work for a client as a freelancer, we would want to ask them questions about, like, hey, how was it finding talent? Finding a client, like how were you able to do X, Y, and Z on the platform? And so asking some of those additional questions to make them remember not just the end part of their experience, but the full experience in itself has really helped us go forward and collect better feedback. But it's still newer. And, surveys in general are tricky when you have, I personally am always like pushing for SMS surveys because you always get a high response rate. But when you have a survey on email, you're going to get a lower response rate. And so it's really about making sure that you're captivating that audience when they are looking at that survey, so that they will continue to answer whatever questions you have. So
interesting. You're almost saying, like, you remind them of their original intent on Upwork, right? So that
exactly.
they answer about how did they accomplish what their original intent was, which is
exactly, yeah.
That's super interesting. Let me pause for a second. I should have said at the start, if you guys have questions as we go, as folks are talking, probably easiest to like put them in the chat. I'll monitor the chat and then ask them as we go. We will stop early and leave time for like live questions, or I'll just read from the chat and ask questions as well. But I should have said that for the audience in general. Okay, yeah, maybe Ben, if you could talk a little bit about you've been 19 years at the one company, so I imagine it's sort of changed over time. Maybe I'll slightly change the question of if you could talk a little bit about maybe what your early challenges with customer feedback were, and maybe kind of what it looks like now, as obviously your company has grown quite a bit over the time that you've been working there.
Yeah, for sure. I think there are a few core challenges that we've seen and continue to see. The tools help a lot, but one of them that I like to point out is kind of the relative challenge of helping a customer on a particular issue or feedback request. Probably every team in here has the experience where there's an issue that a lot of customers are having, but your macros and your workflows and everything is really great. So that's not the one that your agents are really getting hung up on. They'll answer it all day long, but then they'll have a really difficult one and they'll shoot that up the chain and, oh, we need to fix this. And it's like, well, one customer had a really bad experience. So yes, let's fix this. But we also have like 10,000 customers who are having a mediocre experience. And so weighing that between what feedback gets surfaced directly from the team is a challenge, and having the ability to just on a moment's notice, retroactively go in and look at that. It's like, okay, well, how much are we dealing with this? And how angry are the people? And what type of customers are dealing with this? Or, whatever. So I think, I guess just weighing it against other opportunities is one of those challenges. Like, we have a limited team. I mean, most of you, unless you've just raised a huge round, have very limited teams. And so, just trying to figure out, okay, well, what are we going to work on next and how do we prioritize that? And the support team is a phenomenal place to start with that idea, but then passing it through some sort of analytical filter. And in our case, it's, Idiomatic, but, before Idiomatic, we were, tagging and doing everything we could to try and create that sort of data, because it's always been a challenge. Do we work on this or work on that? So I think that's, a pretty big one. One of the other challenges is just the availability, and that kind of bleeds over some, but okay, so your product team comes to you and says, okay, well, we have too many login tickets. We're going to start overhauling our login system. It should be easy to log into our site. Probably every platform here has experienced some project to improve their login process. And to be able to immediately start shaping those discussions analytically rather than, okay, well, we're still going to do all of the user research. We have a phenomenal research team. We're going to talk to our agents. We're going to talk to all the product teams, but having a good place to start on at least narrowing in, your research team probably doesn't want to hear, hey, can you go figure out what's wrong with our login system and why people aren't logging in well? They probably want to hear, oh, we're having too many people on iOS who are having trouble with the MFA or whatever, right? And so, okay, well, let's narrow it down there instead of just, I don't know, go tell me what we should do to our login. So, in terms of those shifts over the years, we've gotten a lot more sophisticated with that. So the problem isn't access to data anymore. Now the problem is kind of making it even more actionable, make it really, really easy to our product teams. We've done a lot of great work in the last few years working on this to kind of talk a little bit more towards the solution rather than the challenges. But we now have customer advocates embedded in every product team. These are active working agents, and their mandate is you come with the voice of the customer to those. Like, you better be prepared. Come in not with, oh, I think I answered a ticket last week about this. It's like, oh no, let's, dig in and be prepared there. So I think that's kind of the shift. In the very earliest days, it was just what was the loudest voice yelling the loudest about what they're dealing with on the help desk. And now it's become much, much more sophisticated, which are good problems to have.
Yeah, for sure. I can testify, because of the work we do at Idiomatic, that almost every company that we've ever worked with, largest issue is login. So that's a good understanding of other companies that you have there, Ben. The first part that you talked about is really interesting. We've been talking to companies about the slow burn versus the slow burn issues, right? Versus the emergencies, right? It's really easy to jump on emergencies, right? Your software caused something really horrible for a customer. Like, yeah, of course, go try to make that right and fix that. But it's really easy to ignore the slow burn issues that you're talking about, Ben, right? The ones that everyone's just used to them already, right? And so it's easy to just ignore them and let them keep going,
Yeah. I think, another thing kind of very specific to login and that slow burn is, when we bought Flickr 4 years ago, Flickr had never had any real support team. They had half a person supporting the entire support thing. And so getting into figuring out what on earth should we even be working on was a very interesting and unique challenge. And no surprise to Matt or any of the other Flickr users in here, it was Yahoo login to begin with. But that, like, Alyssa's laughing because she's seen her reports there. It was just such a bad login system. But part of that problem was that would drown out our help desk, and to figure out the rest was kind of a challenge, right? Something 91% or way high percentage was Yahoo login. But having the tools to then, the rest is important too. We got to work on login, but not every single person in the company is going to be working on login. That's just not effective. And so kind of getting through the crush, it's really hard to ask a brand new support team, well, what's your problem? My problem is login. Well, yeah, I know that. What else should we be focusing on? Those are other interesting challenges.
Yeah, what else could we do? I saw someone, Michael, you raised a hand to ask Ben a question. I think you could go ahead and do that if you want to talk about.
Thank you. Hey everyone, I'm Michael. I work at Planning Center, which is a church management software. I work as a product support specialist. So essentially, kind of what we were talking about, Ben, I work as a customer advocate on the product team. Part of my responsibility is tracking feature requests and then, communicating that in a meaningful way to the product manager and the project coordinator. I was wondering if you have any strategies, insights into, tools that you use to organize that data to make it meaningful, so that you can, communicate that in an actionable way to the product team.
Yeah, from the very, at the very basic, and I realize it's going to come off as they're paying me, but I promise I am paying Idiomatic. It's not reverse. But Idiomatic is a fantastic tool for that, right? We just filter it straight down to what are we talking about? What's the team here? The team doesn't, if it's the, we do a lot of prints and gifts commerce. They probably don't need to be looking at login tickets at the moment. They're going to be looking at billing errors. They're going to be looking at shopping cart issues and that sort of stuff. So getting directly into that, having the ability to make that not a burden so that you're not taking shortcuts there. It can be tough to dig through every dang ticket on it. And so some sort of, aggregation there helps. And, for us, all the classic sorts of, software development, we're using, Jira and ClickUp and all that sort of stuff, but having those things tracked in the tickets and linked in the tickets. So the next time the engineer or the product manager or the designer or whoever is digging into that ticket, you're linking to dashboards or at least dumping the data in there. I would highly recommend that. We're happy to get into a lot more details. I see Denise Twom down, at least on my screen down there. This is really, her wheelhouse at our company, and she has a wealth of information. So I will volunteer her for you to get into those specifics. We'd love to chat.
Sweet. Thanks, Michael, for the question. Great question. I did not plant that question. Allison, maybe you could talk a little bit about HubSpot and one of the sort of challenges to getting action on customer feedback traditionally been.
Yeah, very similar to what's already been said. Prioritization, how, what's the impact going to be if we choose XYZ over XYZ? That's the big thing we're really focused on right now. But for us, it's our big focus at the moment is how then do we streamline all of our many inputs, which I mentioned, so that makes our job easier. And so that it's all, we use Idiomatic as well, especially around feature requests. When that's going into feature requests, are we able to say, what will the impact be to NPS? What will the impact be to churn or cancellations or lost deals? Being able to drive that impact is really key, but being able to clean up those processes that are feeding into that is a huge focus to us right now. We're working really cross-functionally with a lot of teams to get that done, working with UX research, working with our product operations team. Just trying to clean it up as much as possible. And as part of that, I would say, nailing that input process is helping us close the feedback loop more. We can already see that happening. So we are doing things like sending emails to sales reps and CS reps when a ticket gets closed. So if a request is closed, everyone who voted on that ticket was going to get an email. If the request doesn't quite fit their use case, then they can go file another one and it will, go to that product manager. But if it does, then they're able to close the loop with the customer better. So yeah, cleaning up those inputs is helping us launch things like that because it's just a lot neater data set to work with. So that's been key on our end as far as driving impact. And then we're able to get more folks filing feature requests if we can prove that, like you're going to get this email in your inbox when it's completed. We can hopefully get more data coming in and information, but in a cleaner, neater way.
That's an interesting challenge in the consumer space, because internally you're absolutely right. Like, people will give you more feedback if they see you taking action on it. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about how do we go to the, like, how do we get consumers to actually believe that, right? Like, how does a company let its customers actually know, hey, we're taking action on this feedback, so it's worth your time to like tell us that you couldn't log in, or that you had some error in the billing. I don't think that's quite nailed yet. Certainly haven't done it at Idiomatic in terms of giving our clients an ability to sort of show off the actions that they're taking based on the feedback. That may be on the frontier. That may be a next step to just encourage even more feedback. Maybe Allison, for a follow-up question, Ben, you started to talk about sort of how you're embedding customer advocates in every product team. Just in terms of like structure, in terms of how you handle like voice of customer and sort of who's responsible, and how that feedback actually works internally in terms of like embedding people in teams or doing weekly reports. Like, how is your team, your sort of voice of customer experience team sort of embedded in the rest of the organization, or how is that structured, I guess, is the question for you, Allison.
Yeah, so we I feel like our team has kind of made its rounds on various teams throughout the company, but we are part of central operations now. So we have a very direct connection all the way up to, our executive staff, which has been really great. And getting that visibility is huge. So we essentially serve now as a great conduit between our product team and between what we call our flywheel team. So our success, support, and sales teams as well. So that's been a really big part of it, is getting that visibility all the way up to that level so that we're naturally seen as that resource throughout the company. We do have really good contacts on our support team who have something, similar to what Ben mentioned earlier, is having some folks embedded. We're pulling in that support data Idiomatic as well. So while they don't sit on our team, we do have really strong connections. So for us, it's just about having visibility at that high level so that we are seen as kind of the go-to source. And even if we don't own the data set or own the feedback, or that person doesn't sit on our team, we've built those really strong cross-functional connections and can start to connect the dots for folks across the company. And we've done a lot too around, this was kind of our first year doing these big annual reviews for our product groups and different leaders, where we try to like bring together all of those different teams before annual planning so that we can really bring together all that data, make sure we are having the voice of the customer as elevated as possible. So yeah, getting that visibility, being centrally located has been really key for us.
Awesome. Yeah, you bring up a good point about not just the product team, but like the other teams being customers of customer feedback. That's actually one of the misnomers we sometimes have when we first start talking to a prospect, is they'll be very focused on the product feedback use case, but I'll have to remind them that that's not the only consumer of customer feedback at a company. Maybe that's a good question for you, Serena, in terms of how your company is handling customer feedback. Who are the primary consumers of that internally at Upwork? In addition, I assume product is one of them, and from working with you guys, I know that it is. But who are the other important folks that really are consuming and stakeholders in trying to take action on the customer feedback you're collecting?
It's kind of mind-boggling how Upwork is with how hungry we are for feedback in general. And so it's all of our teams within our organization that are so excited about CX insights and understanding their customer segments and who's going to what page or what experience they have when they search for X, Y, and Z or look for this. And so our group is really fortunate. We partner really closely with the UX team to make sure that the surveys that we're writing and the surveys that they're writing are either like if they're too similar or they're not, they're different, or maybe we have something, we try to focus on making sure that we all are supporting each other, which is fantastic. I love my UX friends. In addition to that, we also have like weekly meetings where we meet with our folks who are serving as the voice of our customers from social, or, someone goes on Reddit, or we have a lot of partners within go-to-market and also a product, of course. And we just geek out. We share all of the things. We all are enthusiastic and excited. We all want to have a survey. We all want to know what everybody's doing. And it's been just a really, really great experience that way. The thing that I've learned coming in, and I know I'm a newbie to Upwork, and, when you start a new job, you make your rounds and you meet all the people, and everybody that I've met has been so eager to figure out how they can help contribute so that we can get more insights, or we can get a better picture overall of what that experience is. And also, as you can clearly tell, I like to talk. So that really helps as well, make new friends and share all of the things with everybody. It's been really great and awesome.
Awesome. I know, so there was one question in the chat, which I was going to wait till the end, but I know NPS is really important at Upwork, just from our working together and what I hear from my team on my side. So I figured it's a good time to ask it now. So the specific question was, what financial metrics have you had luck aligning with NPS scores feedback? I interpret that question to mean like, are there any financial metrics that you can tie back to, like, if we improve our NPS by X%, it'll improve this financial metric or this churn metric or something like that? Are there any metrics that you've been able to tie to NPS to make it more actionable?
So as a newer company, we're still leaning into that. I think that right now we're trying to establish how we can set that up, and we're shifting to be less operational and more strategic so that we can focus on those items. But that's kind of a work in progress for us right now. So.
How about Allison or Ben? I don't know if you guys talked a little bit about NPS, I think, but have you been able to tie any metrics to changes in NPS scores to try to make your teams sort of see the benefit of improving a score like that? Maybe we'll go ahead, Ben.
I was going to throw it to Allison because I can speak to NPS, but we don't use it anymore. So Allison probably has been. Our answer is a little simpler on that, which you could probably guess because of that, but go for it, Allison.
Yeah, I would say, this year with those annual reviews that I mentioned was probably our first kind of stab at working with our product ops team to say, and it's not just NPS, it's definitely part of it. Our in-product NPS and our annual relationship survey, that's definitely part of trying to drive that financial impact. But I think there's a lot more that goes into it. So we're casting the net a little bit wider with these annual reviews that I mentioned, and kind of took our first go at it this year, which was exciting to see. And I think, again, too, we don't have it down yet, but that cleanup and streamlining process is a huge part of being able to do that. When you have so many different inputs, it's a little difficult for an analyst to work with all that's going on there. So we're working at cleaning that up so we can improve that in the future for sure.
Yeah, we obviously, have experience working with a lot of companies that try to do this. I would say probably the most mature company that we've ever worked with at doing this was actually our first customer that we ever worked with, which was Slack. Slack was, at the time, and I'm sure it's changed now with the acquisition and everything, was laser focused on NPS for growth. They were able to tie or make a sort of metrics driven argument that NPS, positive and higher NPS scores, led to more word of mouth and then more growth for them. And so they really tied it to like their word of mouth, their product led growth. And so they were super laser focused on how could they improve their NPS scores. But we've seen people tie it from everything from churn, like your chance of churn, upsell, cross-sell, depending on how your system is built, conversion if you're on a free, the NPS of the free tier, leading to conversions to a paid tier for sure. So it just depends, I think, a lot on your business and what you find important there. And then maybe we'll leave the last 15 minutes for questions if anyone has any. So maybe the last question for me, maybe we can start with you again, Allison, is obviously the world has changed a little bit over the last couple of months. I see a lot of different strategies in response to this. One that I predict happening will be a lot more focused on cost savings and sort of ROI. How do we drive efficiency? How do we drive more efficiency in our customer operations in general? So kind of maybe a open-ended question or asking you to predict the future, but how do you see you guys using, if at all, customer feedback in that process? Are you thinking of doing any new things or any new initiatives around efficiency, around making your operations more streamlined, around cutting costs, and using customer feedback to know what's really going to have the most positive ROI for you?
I definitely see us investing in tools like Idiomatic more, pulling more data into that. We were doing a lot of manual coding before Idiomatic, as I'm sure a lot of us have had to do in the past. So it's about saving manpower and being more efficient. That's definitely something we've already leaned into a ton, and I think we'll continue to do so. I think, again, cleaning things up, streamlining inputs, is still going to be really huge for us and helps us gain efficiency. That's definitely kind of one of the big areas of focus that we're doubling down on right now. And as we've talked about a ton, tying it to impact, tying this launch drove X amount of a reduced churn by X%. So, things like that. We've definitely invested in analysts on the CXM team, which has been a huge, huge help for sure. And then doubling down on those relationships across product operations and UX is proving to be very valuable, because a lot of times we have the data and information, like we have so much out there. Why am I going and doing customer interviews when like UX just did 6 months worth of research and it's just a matter of communicating and talking? So I'm a people person, and I think leaning into that as much as possible actually helps drive efficiency a ton. So we're doing a lot of that for sure.
Awesome. How about you, Ben? Maybe same question. How do you see it changing? Are you focused on different things? Anything that's changing recently?
Yeah, I don't think our focus at the moment or in the coming months, despite the market changes, is much around kind of efficiency. We have a small and mighty and pretty efficient team, but we do continue to see that, and our focus is around growth and value for our customers right now. We see a lot of areas we just could be doing a better job, and so our agents, our support agents and support teams on both sides are really focused on identifying, okay, well, how do we focus on areas where we're creating more value and hopefully getting more customers that way. Even as we get efficiencies on our teams, we've been shifting our support to kind of almost like I said, we're a consumer brand, so it's not really success, but a lot of kind of focus on helping convert customers into paying customers and helping them be successful so that they stay with us forever. So it's similar to kind of the efficiencies of just trying to not expand our team dramatically. We haven't had to expand our team because for those of you who followed our story through some of my previous chats, our team's been here forever. So, we don't have turnover, so we're not looking at expanding or contracting or that sort of stuff, but a continual focus on how do we drive those kind of real results. So our focus there is, adding more customers and growth rather than say cost efficiencies, but similar, it's the other side of the coin, right? So.
I was muted. I was saying for sure, what are the benefits of the approach you guys have taken to your sort of long-term company building, which is great. I guess final word from you, Serena. Do you see the focus of Upwork, changing as the markets have given us a little new information about sort of where we're at? Any changes or different focuses that you might have in terms of what you want to bring internally and try to start getting people to take action on?
Oh, absolutely. I'm so excited to share all of the feedback so that we can get in front of customer problems, specifically so we can look for, solutions that we can automate to make things a little bit easier. And so we're really focused on that right now. And then also, like, how do we prioritize our feedback, and as a growth driver versus identifying cost savings? Like, how do we manage that is a really big piece as well. And then going back to what Allison said, we're kind of in the same boat. Like, we always are interested in looking at new tools and like collaboration. I can't tell you, it is the most important thing ever. Like, the only way you can have a successful CX program is you're only as strong as your partners. And so for us, it's a huge deal that we are working with our product marketing team. We're working with our UX support team as well, and just making sure that all of us are aligned and sharing that information, making sure that we're all transparent and like just have all of the things. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. The way I think about it is there's an infinite number of things you could do, right? Like a virtually infinite number of things you could do to try to improve your customer experience or your customer journey. And so knowing where the biggest ROI is going to come, right? If I could fix this or this, but I don't have time to do everything, right? So being able to quantify the impact, as you said, Allison, is I think a really important piece of deciding where to spend your time. Honestly, where to spend your time and focus is, like, at the end of the day, that's the most precious resource all of us have, is like where we're going to do every day. So no, that's super insightful, and thank you guys for joining the panel. I guess that will be it from me in terms of questions. We still have a few folks here, so any of the folks from the audience want to raise hand and ask any follow-up questions or thoughts from the panelists in the last 10 minutes? I see Matt first.
Yeah, I would love it to ask a question. Thank you. And actually, I'm embarrassed to admit, never attended a support-driven event ever. I don't know how I've managed 30 years in this business without doing this, but literally just saw a tweet about it yesterday and registered. So, and super glad I am. Ben, Allison, Serena, thanks for sharing. That was awesome. Just for context, I run customer support, sales, and customer experience for a very large regional pest control company, one of the largest in the US. But before that, I was in banking, healthcare, telecom. And then, as I mentioned to Ben, a longtime fan of Flickr. Met my very best friend, my soulmate, I would say, on Flickr about 14 years ago or so. Him and I are joined at the hip. Our wives often joke that we met online. We're like, we met on Flickr. It was a different era, but yeah, I met my very best friend on Flickr. So thank you for that question about everything you were talking about was super fascinating, and it was great to hear, Allison, that you were doing some manual stuff before, because I always think that sometimes we're the only one that does that. But I'm curious to know from all three of you, are you pulling in any unstructured data? You all kind of touched on getting feedback directly from your support teams, but are you aggregating that in any cool and interesting way? Because that's something that, we get tons of input from all over the organization, from external, from surveys, from reviews, all that kind of thing. But joining that all together, and maybe, and I don't literally know anything about Idiomatic other than what I just Googled earlier. But are you doing anything to pull in that unstructured stuff directly from your support team and actually aggregate that alongside the formal stuff?
Maybe Allison, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Yes, we are pulling in NPS comments. We're pulling in support data, our what we call roadmap requests, our feature requests that are coming from sales and success. It's an open notes field. We actually removed all of the fancy stuff from the form, trying to get reps to categorize things. So it's just kind of unstructured, and we are aggregating all of that in Idiomatic in a variety of different ways, and categorizing it into our themes so that product and flywheel teams can easily access it quickly. There was some stuff going on in the chat, and I want to reiterate that for us, a big win was removing ourselves as blockers. So getting that all into Idiomatic or a tool like that so that anyone can access it and play around with it has been huge for us. And then we took that in those annual reviews I mentioned, we took that information and kind of merged it with UX research. They've done a lot of great work around journey mapping. And as we were doing that, it's like feedback and data came out of the woodworks where people are like, "Ooh, I have something interesting about that. And this person over here heard something." And so we're taking things from like Slack communities or reviews and kind of putting that all together in those presentations that I mentioned to our team ahead of annual planning. So yeah, it was aggregated in Idiomatic, and then we like went up a level and kind of like merged it with other things we were hearing into some different reviews.
That's awesome. I'll say this, I mean, the cost of doing this meeting, taking an hour out of my day, you just made it worthwhile because it's that reminder. I haven't thought about this in the last couple of years, but breaking away from those categories and certainly on our support team side, we've been guilty of that. We go back and forth, but yeah, that's a great reminder of how to do that. Thank you.
Sorry, I froze for the last part of your answer, Allison. I was just gonna, I don't know if anyone added, I was just gonna add Matt. Yeah, so Idiomatic, I should have been more clear. That's what we do. We pull in unstructured data and we categorize it or label it. That's like the fundamental thing that we do for clients. And I will say that like when we talk to prospective clients, they always ask us, do you have any tips for how we're pulling in this unstructured data? Exactly what you asked for, Matt. And one of the things that Allison just said is what I always tell people is remove yourself as the blocker, right? The less work your customers have to do, the more feedback they'll be willing to give you. And so it's much easier to just write however you feel than it is to answer, 20 survey questions. And so what I tell people is go more open-ended, eliminate a lot of the structure if you can, and then you can categorize it on the back end, right? You can sort of quantify and make sense of it on the back end instead of asking a bunch of structured questions. So that's advice that I offer to everyone that I talk to in the space. Thanks for the question.
Can I just throw a quick comment in there? I mean, there were certain of these things that I called out earlier, like cancellation surveys, where previously the really only way we would know that your product teams, that everybody, to Allison's point of being the blocker, would actually know how to, what was going on there, is to go through and read literally every single one. So we would have a person who would read every single one, and then you go to that person and say, okay, well, why are our customers leaving us last month or the month before? How did that change from May of last year? And all of that stuff, because it's just unstructured. Customers are going to put anything in there, right? Similar to app reviews and all that sort of stuff. But the only way we ever figured it out before was to literally just have a person, and now it's everybody.
I am always that person. I am always volunteer distribute to read all of the things, even with Idiomatic and all of the great categorization that you offer. I still have a problem not reading the data, just because you find some interesting tidbits in there that really does help you. But yes, it is really hard to, even when you have the tools, it's hard to step out of that. I just thought I'd throw that out there. Or maybe it's just me. I have a reading problem, I think.
No. I think you have a customer obsession problem.
That too.
Which is a good problem to have. Okay, great. Any other questions before we let the panelists go? I saw a great idea for those of you not in the chat. It's not really a question, but Adula was talking about getting customer groups in similar industries together to align on some of this feedback and things that you can do. So we'll try to share that idea from the chat as a follow-up to this as well.
Can I ask a question for Allison and Serena?
So
earlier in the meeting, we talked about getting the action to prioritization to actually hopefully feature build, bug fixed, whatever. I'm curious how either of you are handling the 6 months, 12 months later, did it work? Right? The accountability, are we tracking? Like, did we reduce those contacts? Do you have systems set up for that? Is it, anyways, I'm curious.
Yeah, it's changed for us over the years. Before I was at HubSpot, we had what we called sharp edges. So our VOC team would identify a sharp edge, and we would have like the top 5, or I don't even remember the number exactly. And they would put teams on that. So we have teams at HubSpot that were developed because we were like, we're fixing this sharp edge. And in that scenario, we were really able to track it because we're super honed in on top 5 things, and there's a team working on it. We have analysts tracking different metrics, like depending on what the issue is. Now we don't have those huge 5 sharp edges. It's just this like vast landscape of different pieces of feedback. We're prioritizing for all of our product teams. And I'd say we're getting to that, being able to quantify it piece. Like we're kind of taking our first few steps into that with that tool that I mentioned before. So now, a ticket has a status and it's just a lot cleaner. We've cleaned up our database. We're still working on that, but the hope is now that we have, and one part of it was just giving reps visibility to like seeing where it is in the process. So we're working on that, and our hope is that we can start to merge that with our CXM reporting on a quarterly and annual basis. So now that we've launched that connection, that kind of like close of the feedback loop, we would look to be doing that in the next like 6 months, and in our next round of annual reviews, and saying, these are the 10 things that brought us the best reduction in churn, or the best responses and NPS. And so we're just getting our feet wet in that, I'd say.
The very talented Ethel, who I believe is on this call, she works on my team. She actually does a lot of this work in through what we call the VOC repository. So we collect all of various types of feedback from various areas that might not be normal, and we come up with a report, like normal in the sense of like it didn't come through. It came through maybe not like Twitter or through a survey, but it came through like from a CS feed, like a CS agent giving us that feedback, or some random piece of information that we keep seeing pop up through Zendesk or something that Ethel will collect, and we will track that feedback and then try to figure out like, okay, so we know we have these things. Let's connect with these cross-functional partners we have in-house and share that information and see who owns what. How do we get that information to the right individual so that they then can take that information and work on it? And we track all of that through this repository. And we have a weekly call that Miss Ethel, who's amazing, who she manages and runs all that. So, so far it's been really interesting to see how we did like a year in review, and I started like in September. So it was really fun to see like through the year in review, how many things through the VOC repository and through some of these other areas that we're monitoring, how many we were able to connect with the right person and then get those things closed through. And then we just, share that out, and it's amazing, and just keep going forward. So yeah.
One thing, Ben, I'll share from the Idiomatic perspective is we've thought a lot recently about how we add that to the product. I'm frozen again.
You just came back. Wait, we lost you for a second. I think we can hear you. No, we lost him.
I'm Chris's co-founder, so I'll finish his thought. Yeah, we've been thinking a lot about how to add that to the product so that the various teams are able to see it. There was a question. There was another question in the chat around. It seems like a lot of the magic of this lives in the gray area between CX and product and research. Do you have strong opinions on where the ownership of this should live in the org?
Denise has been jumping in for us, so I'll let her answer, stand in chat, and let one of you answer.
So for our team, we are product and research. So we run both, which has been really helpful. But so I think that since we bucket all of that together, as well as like partner with our go-to-market team, so it's all one. So and Upwork is fantastic in the sense that there's not like we have things that we own, but it's very, very much a collaborative endeavor, which is fantastic. So.
yeah, and like I mentioned before, we're now central operations team, kind of a direct line up to the CEO. So that's been really great. We've sat on GTM. We've merged with a team from product. We've kind of been all over the place. And it was the same thing at my former company when I was at Eventbrite doing VOC, kind of hopped around, but I'm enjoying being very central right now.
I can jump in here. This is Denise. Sorry, I've just been typing maniacally. I figure I should probably talk. I think it doesn't, I will caveat this to say every team works differently. So it depends on what will work for your company. I worked with, when I was managing a support team at my previous company, we reported to marketing and it worked beautifully. Some other companies might not have that work well. I've also reported to product before, and that also works well, depending on how your team structure and your company culture is. I would say that right now we have support heroes who have been doing this customer advocate work for almost 2 years, and it's worked so well that we're thinking of formalizing that role. They attend Scrum meetings, they do a lot of the bug analysis, they work with Alyssa on trends we're seeing in Idiomatic. I work with them to project manage, and so they're in all the meetings and the planning meetings with the PMs. And so before we even start ideation on any kind of new feature release, the CAs are there bringing all the bug reports and feature requests that are around that feature, but they still sit in the support team and they still work on tickets, just not the same sort of amount of time. And we found that it's been working really well for us. But for other people, they might want to carve out product specialists that are almost like assistant product managers. I've heard of APMs and other companies who do something similar to that. So it really depends on how your company is currently structured and where you think that bridge could be formed. I was doing this role. Now I have 4 people who are basically extensions of me doing that, and they get to attend more meetings and do deeper analysis, and I can work with our director of support to come up with strategies and initiatives that sort of combine all that work with the other teams. I'm happy to answer questions on how we got here. Yeah.
Thanks, Denise. Well, Chris texted me that his internet is out, so on his behalf, we want to thank our panelists. Thank you so much for joining, as well as all the attendees. We will share the recording with everyone, and thank you, Support Driven, for co-hosting with us. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.